second here. Sometimes we want to add a little bit of tonal quality to it, and gradients is one way that we can do that. And the great thing is there are tools built in for it, so I don't even have to make gradients if I don't want to from scratch. There's so many of them built in, but it's not obvious where they are. So in the swatches panel, I've got these couple gradients here. That's great. I can fill it in with that gradient. So I can have orange or blue or that. That's all I have, right? So I need to actually create some on the fly, or I can use some built-in ones. Under the swatches panel menu, down under Open Swatch Library, we have a swatch library called Gradients. And this is also where you would find things like your Pantone colors, or if you've created colors in another document. We talked about taking patterns that we created, and we can copy and paste those items in there. You can also say Other Library, and you can open up an Illustrator file that has that pattern swatch in there already and load it that way. But in this case, I want to come in here and say, I don't want Pantones, I don't want anything like that. I'm going to come in here and choose Gradients. And look at all the great gradients I have. Fruits and vegetables, who wouldn't want that? Let's do metals. This is actually kind of cool. I open that up, and now I have this whole swatch library full of metal-looking gradients. I'm going to just choose large thumbnail view so we can see them a little better. All right, so I have all these different gradients to choose from. I'm going to grab this by the tab and just drag this across until I get the panel highlighted and drop that in. So now I have those to choose from. Instead of them being in my swatches here, I'm going to come up here and look at my metals. So now at least I have a bunch to choose from. Right? So I can choose those, and I can create some changes based on those. Obviously, if I like this, but I want it to be a different color or something, I can do that as well. But I like to start with the ones that are pre-made. So if I want something that looks like it's metallic, I'll just go ahead and choose one that's here. So let's look at how those gradients are made. So I'm going to go ahead and open the gradient panel, which is down here. Click on that. I'm going to just rip this off so it's floating up above here. And I have two types of gradients. I have a linear gradient and a radial gradient. So that will come in handy. That doesn't look so good as a radial. We'll play with a radial in a second, see what that looks like. But what we have down here, without going into everything that's in here, is our color stops. Those are the most important things. So these down here, I've told it to go from white. Let's actually zoom in a little on that so you can see that white, and there's a gray, and another white, and another gray, and another gray. So basically, these are all the different colors that I want to have show up in that gradient. And then these are where the transition happens. So right now, these little diamonds are halfway in between each of the colors. So every time there's a new color, the transition happens about halfway. So let's see what happens when I change that a little bit. Let's just make this a little bit more here. If you notice, that got thicker. So that's what it's just telling us, when does that gradient happen? How long does that take? I can also say, this moves over a little bit here, and we have a little bit more white. Move this over, maybe we have a lot of white. All right, so we can play with that gradient. I'm only making changes to this particular gradient that's here. I'm not creating a swatch off of that. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and maybe I decide I don't want there to even be all this extra white. I can just grab a color and drag it off. Now that whole instance of white is gone. I can also create another color just by clicking underneath. And it creates a new one, and I can double click on that, and then this is where I tell it what color. Let's make it blue, right? So as I'm changing it, it's going to go ahead and change with whatever I have selected in here. So gradients are kind of important to give it some texture. That one is not a very good example, of course, but let's open up one of the other ones that we have and look at the radial. So the radials are kind of cool, and actually I'm going to convert this shape. So I'm going to go ahead and click on this, and I'm going to convert that shape down here to something else. Actually, I can't find where I convert my shape. Maybe I won't convert the shape. Maybe I'll just start over from scratch because I can't find that. Well, I'm going to delete that, and I'm going to create a new shape. I was just going to convert it to an ellipse, and my brain turned off and doesn't remember where that is. But I want to create an ellipse and fill it with a radial gradient. So a radial gradient is going to start out in a circle, and the gradient's going to happen in a circle. But what we can do is we can change where that gradient sits on that particular object. So by using the gradient tool, which is over here, I now get a representation. There's my color stops again. I can play with that color stop right here instead of having to go into the gradient panel. I can just play with it here. So it's the same sort of thing. We've got the stops at the bottom, the color stops, and the transitions at the top. But then I can also grab this little circle, and this is where the gradient starts. I can just pull it up here, and now we have kind of a 3D looking object that's here as well. So we can play with the gradients that are here. I can start changing the colors, of course, if I don't like the colors that are chosen here. But that's usually what I do for a gradient. I can create a gradient entirely from scratch, but I like to start with one that's there, especially if it's one that's got a lot of color stops. I might as well just change out the colors instead of having to build everything from scratch. So I use that a lot when I'm trying to create something that has sort of a 3D look to it. Does that make sense so far? All right, colors and gradients, good? Everybody's good online? All right, we'll keep going then, because we're going to actually work with a character. We're going to see some of the lovely things that I have drawn. So, you know, feast your eyes on these sorts of things. All right, so I'm going to come here to the drawing folder that I have. I have some finished pictures, and I'm going to start with the dumb rabbit, because the dumb rabbit, he's actually kind of cute. Okay, so here's something that I drew. Aw, look at him. And so here's just something silly that I drew, and I drew it all with shapes, right? So I don't have to even think about it. I just said, all right, I'm going to draw this guy. Let's see what he's made of. So let's start with his head. I'm just going to do this really quick because I really want to do this one with the photo that we're going to work with. So I'm just going to create a shape, right? So we'll just grab a color. I'm just going to use some of them that are built in. So I'll just give him a beige face here. And I like to do a little outline sometimes of just a darker color. So I might just come in here and in my swatches, sorry, my colors here, let's actually choose the RGB version of those. Come on. Actually, let's keep that at CMYK here. And I want to take this and I just want to make it a little bit darker on the outside, a little bit darker stroke. And again, I can play with the strokes under the strokes panel and just beef up that stroke a little bit if I want to. But I want to make his ears. How do I make ears? Well, in my mind, they're sort of rectangular with that circle on top. So one thing I might do is just make what we did before. Make a circle, make a rectangle. Now this is where we have to be careful because I have that stroke that's on here. It's going to look a little weird when I start adding those together because obviously there's going to be a stroke like that. But as soon as I use something like the shape builder tool, come over here and just drag across. I now have a shape, and of course the stroke is only on the outside. So I have that item. I have the beginning of an ear. I could change the color, of course. But what I want to do is I want to just angle those in a little bit. So I'm going to go ahead and use my direct selection tool. And we use a direct selection tool when we're dealing with the content of a frame. The selection tool is when it's the frame or the whole container, and the direct selection tool is when I'm working with what's inside. And in this case, I'm working with the elements of the frame, the actual points and segments that made up that particular line. So when I come and roll over this, and I zoom in a little bit so we can see, I can see all those points. That's as if I took it with the pen tool and actually drew those out, those nice arcs. But of course I didn't have to. Those were built into the circle. But all I'm going to do is just grab this bottom line and I'm just going to drag it in. And what I want to do is so that it doesn't dip down too far is I'm going to hold the shift key. And then you notice I can't really, I pretty much stuck with a horizontal line here. I can move it pretty wildly and not have to worry about it. If I let go of the shift key, it could be just ever so slightly jagged. But holding the shift key down keeps me constrained to that nice straight line. So I just grab that. I'm going to grab this one and do the same thing. Whoops. I want to actually grab it, start moving it, hold down the shift key. Or not. It's going to move the whole thing on me. I want to just grab this one line. That's all I'm trying to do. There we go. And hold the shift key. And there we go. Now we have the start of our ear. So we have an ear shape. And I'm going to take this item, and I'm probably just going to drop it right back here, and I want to send it to the back because I'm going to work at stacking orders on this one. I'm going to put everything on the same layer. And the next thing we do, we're going to have multiple layers, and we'll see how that works together. So I'm going to do the object, arrange, and I'm going to say send to back. So I'll send behind that item. And then I want to rotate it a little bit, and it's really cool. I don't have to use the rotate tool, which is here. I don't have to because Illustrator is getting smart enough when I have this selected and I get close to a corner. Look how the little arrow changes to the little rounded arrow. It says, oh, you must want to rotate. You're getting really close to that corner. So I'll just rotate that. So now I have that nice item. I have one ear. And then what I want to do is I want to flip it. So I want it to be exactly even. I don't necessarily need to do it that way, but I'm going to. I'm going to use the reflect tool, and I'll double click on the reflect tool, and I'm going to flip it vertically, and I want to make sure I hit copy. All right, so now I have another ear. And because of smart guides, I can just move this over, and eventually it'll tell me when it's lined up nice and neatly. Or I can eyeball it, maybe move those a little closer together, whatever it is I want to do, and get those lined up. And I might group them together. So I'm going to select them all and hit Command or Control G to group them. Right? Actually, let's undo that because we haven't done the inside of the ears yet. So again, I just duplicated this. I just said, give me this guy here, and I'm going to copy it, and then I'm going to cheat, and I'm going to say, paste in place. So under edit, I'm going to choose paste in place, and it puts it exactly the same place it was. Then I'm going to shrink that guy down. And to do that, to shrink it in from all directions, I need to go to the corners, and I want to hold down the Option key or the Alt key, and I'm also going to do the Shift key to constrain proportions. So when I do that, it draws it inward, like that. And then in this case, I'm going to say, all right, let's fill that with white. So I'm going to click on this little white thing here. And I'm also going to send that to the back. But I don't want to send it all the way to the back. If I send it all the way to the back, it's behind this piece here. I want to send it backwards, but not all the way back. So arrange, send backward. So it sends it back one level. So now it's wedged in between the ear and the shape of his head. So I'm going to just copy and paste that. We're just going to do this really quickly manually. And I'm just going to rotate this. Sure I am. I'm going to select this and get really close and then rotate it in. There we go. And I'll drop that in. And I'm also going to send him backwards. All right, so now we have some ears. We're ready to go. See, drawing is easy. Look how much fun this is. All right, so I want to make these eyes. Actually, let's play with the eyes. The eyes are kind of fun. I think I have, do I have different eyes in this one? I have eyes in another one, under my layers. Yeah, let's actually, I'm going to open up this other one so I can just kind of show you some other eyes there. We'll do Cuddly Bear. Aw, look how cuddly that bear is, right? He looks related to the rabbit. He's kind of the same color and shading, but his eyes are a little different. But I want his eyes to be like Dumb Rabbit. So under here, under the Layers panel, I have this other layer. I have the main layer. If I turn this layer off, I assume you're all familiar with layers because of Photoshop, the little eyeball. Everything goes away except the eyes. The eyes are on their own separate layer. So I can turn those off if I want to. But I'm going to actually drill down. So this works a little differently than layers in Photoshop. This is more of like the same stacking order, but I've got a stacking order on each layer, and then I have other layers. So we keep getting deeper and deeper inside how stacked this item is. Under here, if I drill down here, I actually have two things. I have eyes 1 and eyes 2. I'm going to actually turn this off and turn on this other set of eyes. There's those. See, now he looks like he's related to the rabbit. He's got the same set of eyes. All right, so I'll do that a lot of times. I'll just try different things. Like I'm trying to figure out, okay, what kind of style does this bear have? I don't know. I made these eyes and I thought they were cute. And then, I made these and I thought, oh, those look better. Oh, now he's crying. Oh, his mascara's running. So, now we know he's sad. All right, so I'm going to come back here to the rabbit. Let's actually make his eyes because they look just like the other one's eyes. So to do that, I look at that and I think, okay, and here's what I did when I was trying to draw some eyes. When I first was trying to, come up with a really cool looking, I don't know, maybe really cool looking is not quite the word I was looking for, but I was looking for a specific look to my graphics. I wanted to make eyes, and I thought, well, what do cartoon eyes look like? So I just went out on Google and said cartoon eyes and looked at images, and there's just a lot of people that have all their drawings, and I'm like, okay, that's kind of the look. And again, I looked at it and went, shapes. What kind of shapes are those? Those are a bunch of circles. That's what I see, and some little lines bisecting those circles that are there. So to draw the eyes, I might draw it right on top. I might create a whole new layer because I might want them setting on their own layer. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to say File and say New Layer. And it's going to give it a color, and it's going to just go ahead and choose some of the options that are here. We won't go into all the layer options. But I want to make sure that my layer's on top. I want to make sure that the eye layer is on top so I can see it. If I drag this down below, it's going to sit down below the face that's there, and we won't be able to see it. I'm also going to change it from Layer 2. I'm going to double-click on the name, and we'll call this Eyes. So now I'm going to draw on this layer, and I sometimes lock my other layer because I don't want to accidentally move what's already there. So now I'm just drawing on top. I need to start with a circle. So let's start with the ellipse tool, and I'm going to draw what I think the eye should look like. And in this case, I'll go ahead and leave that stroke that's there as a brown stroke and a fill of white. And that looks decent. I'm going to work with that. Now I want to make this shape. Well, we did that just a minute ago. So I'm just going to come in here, and of course I've got my smart guides turned on so I can see where the center is. And hold down the Shift key so I actually get a nice line all the way across. And by holding the Shift key, I also get this nice angle to my line that's there. I don't get to really, tweak it out really bad like that. By holding the Shift key, it's going to be a nice arc. All right, so I'm going to hit that and let go. And now it doesn't matter that I have this weird fill because in a second I'm going to select both of those and I'm going to go ahead and use the Pathfinder tool. And we're going to go ahead and divide those. So bring the Pathfinder tool back up. We're going to come up here to divide and click on that. Whoops. It does matter. Let's actually take that out. I misspoke. Let's put that on there. Now let's say divide. All right, so now I have that division and it's grouped together. I need to ungroup that. I'm just going to say Object Ungroup. So I have two separate items that are here, and I can take this item at the top and fill that. In this case, I'll just drag it across and fill it. All right, so I've got the beginnings of my eyes here. If we want to change that to black, we can. Let's just do that so it looks a little bit like we were expecting. Make sure my stroke is also black, and then this stroke is black. And then let's do a fill of white so we don't see through his eyes into his skin there. So we've got the beginnings of the eye, and then I'm going to come in here and choose another ellipse, and I'm just going to line this up to the center, and I'm holding down the Option or Alt key so it draws from the center outwards till I get an eye that I like. And I'll drag this down a little bit. And maybe I'll make this a little bit wider. Whatever, I'm going to flip-flop that and take off this stroke. All right, so now I'm getting the beginnings of that eye. Again, see how we work this? And I'm just going to cheat and do copy and paste. And I'll just drop that in and line that up center. Hold down the Option key so it draws from the center outwards. Whoops. I got a little click happy here. Let's grab this guy inside here and hold the Option key and just drag it in a little bit. And we'll make this guy a fill of white. Now we've got to make sure we've stacked it the right way. I don't know what happened here. We have some weird little thing happening here, but we want to make sure that this is at the very front. So Arrange, Bring to Front. All right, so now we've got this eye. Doesn't look quite as cool as the other one did, but that's all right. We drew it a little quickly. But I'm going to select all of that and hit Command or Control G to group that together and zoom out a little bit. All right, so we have an eye here, and then I want to duplicate that. And it's actually kind of good that I have this weird little thing, because what's going to happen is if I grab this and I Option or Alt drag, I get a duplicate. But now that item is on the same side, it's on the. I want to actually have it so that it's a mirror image of that. So I can go up to the flip, to reflect, and double click on that, and just tell it flip vertically. Don't copy. I actually just want it to flip the one that's there, and now I have mirror images of those two eyes that are there. This guy looks a little more mean than dumb. So we've got dumb rabbit and mean rabbit over here, right? So I've got those, and I might group those together as well once I've got those lined up, because I moved those around. All right, so we've got some eyes ready to go. I bet you can probably guess how easily I made this. That's a triangle, right? So that's pretty easy. Let's just make a triangle. I'll come over here, go to the polygon tool, and I'm going to just start drawing out. Look, we have a triangle here, and automatically when I hold the Shift key down, it automatically flips it around. I don't want it like that. I really want it pointing down, but I'm going to have to wait and flip it around. So I'm going to create the triangle. I'm going to go over to my Appearance panel, and I'm going to choose Effects, and I'm going to add an effect. Stylize Rounded Corners. So I'm just going to round the corners. Let's preview that. That looks good. Okay, there we go. Now I just need to flip that. So I can just grab the Rotate tool if I want. Let's just grab that guy up here, rotate him until it looks good. There we go. And then I'll just move him into place. If you notice, see this weird box? That's because when I look at it, when I move this, you notice it still has the pointy rectangle. It's because I haven't expanded the appearance. So at any time, I can come up and choose Object, Expand Appearance. I can't really make any changes to it now, because now it sees that as these individual points with the, as if we had drawn it with the pen tool to get those exact corner points as they are. I'm going to undo that. I'm going to leave it like that. If there's no reason for me to expand the appearance, I won't. All right, let's make this. We want to make the mouth with the teeth in there. I got to figure out how we did that, right? So let's go ahead and create an ellipse, and we're going to draw the mouth. And then I also want to draw out the teeth. That's a rounded rectangle, but I want to start with a rectangle, and I'm just going to kind of draw it in place where I need it. Whoops, I didn't want to do the rounded rectangle. I'm going to use the regular rectangle, which I did, but it still has, the last thing I drew had those rounded corners, remember. So it's automatically drawing that with rounded corners, which is good, because that's what I was going to do, is draw them and then add the rounded corners. But because it always picks up the last thing that you did, it's drawing with those. So I would add that if I needed to. Let's actually make these gray. Let's make our teeth gray. That looks good, and I don't want there to be any stroke on it, and there's not. Good. That's great. So I'm going to go ahead and Option or Alt click on those, drag across. I'm going to take these and I'm going to group them, and then I'm just going to place them where I want them to be, right in the middle of this circle. And that looks pretty good, except I need them to be inside that circle that's there. So how do I do that? So what I need to do is I need to copy them, and I need to paste them right back to where they are, but I need to paste them inside another object. So I basically have to use one object as a mask on the other object. So I'm going to do copy, or cut would probably be the better thing to do, because that makes them go away. Then I'm going to select this item, and I'm going to come down here to a little known tool down here. Draw normal, draw behind, or draw inside. So we're going to do draw inside, and then I'm going to tell it edit, paste in place. It's going to paste it in place, but it drew it inside the item that's selected. So now I have that item there, and it has this weird little, doodad here. And that kind of annoys me sometimes. That just lets me know that I have this sort of masked character. I can come up here under Object and do Expand Appearance, and that should go away, and it didn't. All right, I don't know why it's not going away. Let's just deselect that. Anyway, it's not letting me. There we go. Now it's not selected like that anymore. It's not letting me move it. I'm very confused why it's not letting me move my little guy anymore. Very odd. It like locked it into place for me. Well, let's pretend that this is, no, it's not letting me do anything. Am I in some weird drawing mode that I don't realize what I've done?
Maybe, is the layer locked? No.
I wonder if I locked it. Did I lock the layer? Yes, I did lock the layer, but I was drawing on it. Okay. No, that still didn't do it for me. Oh, no, it did. It did. There we go. Whew. Look at that. I like that. His mouth hanging off the end of his face. That's awesome. Yes, it was a locked layer. There we go. We need to make his face bigger to accommodate his gaping mouth there. There we go. So I have that. He's angry rabbit. I've decided he needs little pointy teeth. But anyway, you get the kind of concept is that I just sit there and start drawing things based on the shape and how can I manipulate it. So learning how to use not just the pen tool, but how to change the items once you've created something using whatever method you've used. If you've used one of the built-in shape tools or you've created things using the shape builder tool, once you get in here, if you use the direct selection tool, everything is still made up of a path no matter how you created it. So I can always come in here and say, well, I actually want this to be a little, I don't know, pokey at the top or something like that, I just want to change the shape a little bit. So there we go. We just had it a little different to the shape just by pulling it out by using the points that are there. So learning how to use the pen tool is actually really cool. Even if you're never going to draw with it, manipulating things with the pen tool is really huge. All right. Let's jump over. I'm going to draw one more thing. This one's going to take a little while, but we're going to draw pretty much the whole thing. Depending on how much time we have will depend on how much we'll actually draw everything, or we'll do a really rough version of it. But this is where layers comes in handy. So I'm actually going to close out Dumb Rabbit and Cuddly Bear. I'll get rid of all of them. They all have names. It's great. So what I want to draw next, what I want to finish up with, I'm going to show you the big finished piece, and then I'm going to show you how I create this and how I think about this. This is where it gets a little more in-depth, is I have this called The Kid. So let's look at what The Kid looks like. Yes, that's fine. Don't worry about that. This is the finished piece that I want to draw. So I have just sort of this outline, this sort of stylized look, and this is something that I like to do a lot. It takes this photo, but I like, I'm not going to draw the face because it's not going to look realistic, and he's not really a cartoon. He's just more a character, just sort of this flat vector-based character. So I want to draw him. Now, I could not draw this from scratch to save my life. So, don't put me on a game show where I have to draw this to get out because we're not going to win the car, I'm telling you. So what I want to do is I want to take a photo and create that. So usually I'll find a photo. This is where stock photography comes in great, or maybe if you guys are photographers, maybe you want to create a character like this. Great, you've got the studio, set something up, set up a scene, and you photograph it, and then you're going to end up with something like this. So I'm going to close that. That's what we want to end up with. So I'm going to use a photo. So I'm going to call this, we'll call this The Kid, because that's what he's called, and I'll put him on a letter size here. To start with, we'll see how big it ends up. And then what I want to do is I want to go ahead and put a photo in, and I want to put it on a separate layer. So it's kind of in the background, and I'm going to draw on top of him the entire time. And we're just going to use him as a guide. Now, you have to decide how accurate you want it to be. So when I'm looking at photos, if I'm doing this whole thing, I want to make sure I find a photo that has a full body photo of that person, because I want to make sure the boots are included. Otherwise, if it was from the waist up, I'm going to have to make sure my drawings are only ever from the waist up. I'm going to have to put him behind, the bar in the saloon, just so that I can, because again, I'm not going to be able to say, I'll take the top of the cowboy that I have, and then I'll draw his legs, because his legs are going to look like Dumb Rabbit, and everything else is going to look a little different. So it's not going to be pretty. So anyway, I'm going to use a photo, and I want to make sure the photo fits what I need. So I'm going to go ahead and place a photo. So I'm just going to come in here, and here's my pictures. And in this case, I just downloaded this stock photography, or stock photo of this cowboy. And I'm just going to click, and he's going to be way too big. Right, so I'm just going to click in the middle here. So of course, everybody loves, little kids dressed as cowboys. That's kind of cute. But what it did is it went ahead and put it on the layer. So I have a couple different options. I can double click this layer, and work with the options for that layer. And I can make it a template, and I can dim the image back if I want. But what I really want to do instead is I'm going to delete that, and I'm going to tell it place again. Actually, I'm using a keyboard shortcut that I've set up. It's not there by default. File, place, and I'm going to choose that same photo. But I want to tell it down here at the bottom that I want it to be a template. So when I do that, it automatically creates a template layer for me. I don't have to think about trying to make it dimmed back or anything like that. I'm going to say place, and it creates a new layer called template. It's automatically locked, which is good, so I can't accidentally move it, and it automatically dimmed it back to a specific amount. So I'm going to double click on that, and I'm going to change the amount that's there. Maybe I want to make it 40% or something like that. Just dim it back a little bit more. And the other thing I want to do is I want to make sure that my artboard is big enough to accommodate this guy, because I made it a letter size artboard, but the image is bigger than that. So I'm going to use the artboard tool and just drag out my artboard to the size of the image that's there, just so I make sure I have that big enough. Or I could make the image smaller. But to do that, I'd have to unlock the layer. All right, so now I have my image, and that's the image I'm going to draw on top of the whole time. But it's locked down, so I don't have to worry about it at all. So what I want to do is I'm actually going to jump out and show you the finished piece that I did, and then I'll show you how I built that. So I'm going to open that up. I'm going to open up my finished kid that's here, and we're going to look at the layers. So this is telling me that my photo that I was using has been moved, and that's fine. I don't care. So, but what I want to do is look at the layers that are here. If you notice, everything, pretty much every piece of clothing that's in there has its own layer. And I'm actually going to turn on my template layer and turn everything else off. And to do that, I can hold down the Option or the Alt key and click on the eyeball where the eyeball belongs and turn that on. But by holding down the Alt key, everything else should go off by default. All right, now the photo is actually missing. So the photo would actually be here because, again, I moved it and it doesn't know where to find it. So this was our template layer that we're starting in that other document, but then I've drawn everything else on top of it. So I can just turn on and off layers bit by bit, and you can see how these things are kind of built together. All right, so I've just built a hat, and then I put the head on top of it. So I make sure that the head is sitting in front of the hat layer. If I rearrange where those layers sit, it looks a little differently. So what I tend to do is I look at the image and I say, okay, how is this put together? How, if I were to build it, and I always think of it as, like, in this case, paper dolls, right? So I think, you know, when you put paper dolls, you've got the doll, and each thing goes on top of each thing. So they have to have cutouts for the other pieces to show through. So that's kind of how I look at this. And I say, okay, what would I start with when here? Well, I would probably start with skin, because skin is probably in the back, and all the clothes are on top of that skin, right? So I'm going to start with his face, probably. That's the first thing I'm going to start with. So I'm just going to zoom in, and we'll kind of do it roughly. We won't worry about getting all our angles exactly right. So we'll have, there's a really rough one that I've done, and I tend to do it, each layer, in a different color just to start with. I'm not worried about what the actual finished color is going to look like. I want to know what it's going to look like while I'm drawing. And the other thing is, I don't want to have a fill when I'm drawing stuff. I'm going to click None. So I've got a stroke of a color, and I'm going to start with bright colors. I just want to make sure that I can see this when I start drawing on top of this that's here. So the first thing I could do is I could maybe make a circle with this, but chances are I'm going to use the pen tool for most of this that's here. Because when it comes to, like, humans and clothing, you're probably not going to find shapes that fit exactly right. You know, if I'm making that acorn one, you know, if I was using a picture of an acorn, I probably could use those shapes and combine them. But for something like this, I tend to use the pen tool. So I'm just going to go up and grab the pen tool, and I'm just going to start drawing. So it's going to tell me I can't draw on that layer. Let's open up my layers panel. And I want to be on this layer. I want to click on the layer I'm on, or that I'm drawing on. And this layer, I'm going to double click here, and we'll call this face. And the reason I'm not doing all the skin is, if we look at it, we notice the hands are in front of the jacket. So that's one difference that I might do is, and I might start out with it on the same layer. I think I'm going to call it skin, and I've got the face and the hands. And I realized later that the face needs to be back here layer-wise, but the hands need to be in front of all the other clothes because his hands are in front of his legs like that. So I can always move it from one layer to the other if I need to. So I try to map it out ahead of time, but a lot of times I'll figure out this isn't working how I wanted it to work. So I'm just going to start clicking and dragging, and what I'm going to do is I'm not going to worry sometimes if I know that I'm going to put the hat on top. I might not worry that the top of the head looks right. But sometimes I don't know which layer is going to be in front, so I may need to be super accurate along here so that they actually butt up against each other. But the great thing is, if I decide, oh, the hat I thought was going to be in front, so I didn't worry about the head, now I realize the head is going to be in front, I can come back with the pen tool and start bringing my lines down so they actually look better. But that's going to be all later when I start finishing up. All right, so I'm going to click, and I'm just going to start dragging, or drawing. Let's actually click and drag out that angle that's there. I'm going to drag another one for his chin, and maybe, whoops, let's actually drag him like that.